Bo Nix potentially holding the Denver Broncos back as they eclipse the halfway point in their 2025 season? Does Sean Payton need to make some drastic changes to his offensive scheme and maybe personnel before things get too out of hand offensively? And what are we to come to expect from this Broncos offense, from this Broncos team, I should say, who now has more wins than any other team in the NFL up to this point? All things to come on today's rundown. Thank you so much for joining us. While you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 1043 YouTube channel. You can find us at the handle at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're watching us live on X or Facebook, we appreciate you so much. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and turn on those notifications so that you never miss a moment of any of the action with us. It's time to get into it and dissect the ugly, almost unbearable at times, Broncos-Raiders Thursday night showdown that took place last night. And to help us break it down, we welcome in friend of the show, Scrappy Will Peterson, Denver sports analyst at DenverSports.com, and a very welcome contributor here at 104.3 The Fan. Will, have you slowly but surely recovered from the grind, the mental and emotional grind that was Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, Richie, because I sort of feel like I got hit by a bus when I woke up this morning. First of all, I didn't play in the football game. And second of all, the Broncos won. That's the thing. It started to remind me of Colts Broncos, the infamous 2022 Thursday Night Football game a couple of years ago with Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, where they eventually lost in overtime. And I think all of Broncos country this morning is waking up feeling like blah. Like, it's Friday. They won. They're 8-2. We're supposed to be in a good mood. But I'll just take my cue from Sean Payton at the podium, Bo Nix at the podium. There was not a lot of celebration going on for the Broncos last night, and rightfully so. Outside of another monster defensive night, there was not much to celebrate in a game that was honestly a 3-hour slog to get through.
You look back at some of the narratives surrounding the Denver Broncos after the 2024 season with Bo's rookie campaign, kind of from start to finish. And it was, they beat up on a bad NFC South. They had a dreadful record in one-score games. And there was question about whether or not the Bo Nix that we were going to get in 2025 was closer to weeks 1 through 4 Bo, or weeks 11 through 18, where he was a legitimate bona fide rookie of the year contender alongside Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers. And thus far, Will, it has really started to feel like the Bo Nix we're seeing week in and week out looks a lot more like New York Jets Bo from 2024, not Tampa Bay Buccaneers early Bo, the Bo that lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a backup quarterback in Justin Fields, robbing us of the Russell Wilson revenge game. And I'm not 100% sure as to why there seems to be some regression, footwork, mechanics, maybe confidence and comfortability in the pocket, but it's getting harder and harder to deny that is the case.
Yeah, no, it is. And it was funny because one of the big narratives over the summer, Richie, was the old sophomore slump. Is it going to happen to Bo Nix? The sophomore slump. Is the sophomore slump even real? Well, guess what? I've got news for you. The sophomore slump is very real because Bo Nix is in the middle of a sophomore slump, and he's in the middle of a bad one, if we're just being honest at this point in time.
And in the midst of all that, Will, the Broncos, who had a abysmal record in one-score games, I think they were 1-7 in one-score games in 2024, 6 of their 8 wins, their NFL-leading 8 wins, have come in one-score games in 2025, in large part because of the continued progression and positive play on the defensive side of the ball, and just enough from special teams most of the time to not completely unravel things, even though it hasn't been impressive of late. So they're reversing some narratives from 2024, but the way that it looks, Will, is what's driving the conversation here locally and even nationally, asking, this can't be sustainable. Can it? Because on one hand, you say no, but they keep doing it, Will. They're 8-2 through 10 games. And I've been one to say they're playing with fire and eventually they're going to get burned. And I don't know how many more matches they have left to strike. And Will, I thought it was going to bite them against the Dallas Cowboys. They have their best offensive showing of the season against a terrible defense. I thought it was going to bite them against the Houston Texans. The defense holds up strong again. CJ Stroud gets knocked out early in the game. They end up winning that one in tight fashion. And I didn't think that it might bite them going into Thursday Night Football against the Raiders. But at halftime of that game, I was starting to rethink it.
Yeah, no, you had to rethink it because let's be honest. If you look at the first half, I mean, it was just outside of the one drive where they scored the touchdown, it was just unbearable. They didn't get their first down, Richie, until 5:20 to go in the second quarter. Think about that. 3 and outs, 4 straight possessions. J.K. Dobbins finally gets a first down. Bo hits Pat Bryant and eventually hits Troy Franklin, and we're all tied up 7-7. And then the defense just does defensive things where the Raiders don't have a first down for 7 straight possessions. It was the longest streak in the NFL this year, and it was the longest for the Raiders in almost a decade. So the script sort of flipped, but I don't blame you for feeling that way at halftime. They could not move the football at all. You mentioned Bo Nix's footwork. Oh my goodness, the guy looks like he's playing on ice skates right now. And honestly, where's Cortland Sutton? Where's Evan Ingram? Like, these playmakers are not showing up. Pat Bryant had the one big catch, and other than that, it was a lot of what we've seen. Throw it to Troy Franklin, throw it to Troy Franklin, throw it to Troy Franklin. That's not really working. I know Franklin had the touchdown, but man, felt like he had a dozen targets last night and only 5 catches. This offense is broken, and thank goodness they have a mini bye to try to fix it. And as the Amazon crew pointed out last night postgame, they have one football game in the next 23 days. That is a good thing. This is the time of year where you want one football game in the next 23 days because you got a lot of work to do. The problem, that one football game is against the Kansas City Chiefs.
It is. And I mentioned during the game as it was unfolding, listen, we have become accustomed to slow starts from this Broncos offense in the 2025 season. But in a season of slow, frustrating, and disappointing starts for Sean Payton and Bo Nix in this offense, this was the slowest and the most frustrating and the hardest to watch. They had a season low in points, a season low in total yards, and yet, Will, they come away with a win. And I just feel like there is a growing sentiment within that locker room that resonates with what we've been saying, which is this is not sustainable. And I'm starting to wonder whether or not there may be some potential friction that could develop between a defense that is playing in a postseason and potentially championship caliber contending way, being held back by an offense that, as you mentioned, is just broken and is not able to put it together for any kind of sustainable stretches during games. I think we saw similar sentiments of that on the shadow of the Super Bowl 50 team, where in 2016 and maybe even a little bit in 2017, you still had a lot of Super Bowl remnants on that defensive core, but the offense headed by Trevor Siemian and with a lot of moving parts and missing pieces in that regard just wasn't there, and it was palpable in the locker room. And you hear J.K. Dobbins in the locker room after the game essentially saying, not only do we know this is not sustainable, but there's legitimately some guilt coming into play for the way that they're playing. Take a listen to J.K. Dobbins speaking after the game, courtesy of our own Andrew Mason.
Like I said, the defense is winning us the games, and we're not helping them. We're not doing them any justice. We're not, like, I feel bad the way we play on offense and the way they play on defense because they're doing so great and then we're doing so bad. And they're our brothers too. So, like, it just sucks because they're out there so many plays, playing their butts off. We can't keep doing that to them, you know, and we'll figure it out as offense. We will.
J.K. Dobbins says we'll figure it out. I don't know that I'm as confident, Will, because this offense has had 10 opportunities out of 17 that occur in an NFL season to quote unquote figure it out. And outside of playing against the Dallas Cowboys, where it was kind of like you were operating in a vacuum and you could have everything you want, and we walk away from that game going, oh, so that's what the Sean Payton system is supposed to look like. They haven't. They played decently well as an offensive unit for most of the game against the Colts and the Chargers in weeks 2 and 3, but they lost those games in part because they weren't able to close, and some of that was actually on the defensive side of the ball. And that's where you get this kind of interesting dynamic of the two sides never seem to be in sync. The defense, for the lion's share of this season, has done their part in carrying the offense, and the offense has barely scraped by to bring what they offer to the table. And in the 2 games where the offense finally seemed to pull some weight, the defense just couldn't get that one crucial final stop.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where winning does it cure all. You know, I think that's a cliche in sports. Well, winning cures all. Everything's good. You think the defensive players are waking up this morning feeling great? Probably not. They're waking up thinking we dragged these guys to another win. And guess what? If we have to play a Kansas City or a Buffalo or a Baltimore or even a Pittsburgh or an Indy in the playoffs, this isn't sustainable. Like, they know that. They're humans too. They're not waking up today going, I can't wait for my 3 days off because we're coming off a win. The defense is waking up today ticked off. And I thought that quote from J.K. Dobbins at the very beginning was revealing. I feel bad. Like, it is to the point in time, and anyone in any job can relate to this. If you're not pulling your weight in your portion of the job, if you have an ounce of self-respect, an ounce of pride, you do feel some guilt about that, because the company can have all the success it wants, but if you're not doing your part, you don't feel good about it at the end of the day. And I think that's how this Denver offense feels today. I don't think that they're, going on this mini vacation thinking, man, I can't wait to kick my feet up and relax. I bet Bo Nix is stressed as heck waking up this morning because he knows what everyone else saw last night. People were clowning on the Broncos, Richie. They were. This was a standalone national televised game. The only thing going on in the sports world last night out of one NBA game and a handful of NHL games. If you're a sports fan in America, you watch this. And what was the word that was used across the country? Fraud. People think the Denver Broncos are a fraud after watching that epic fail on offense last night.
Yeah, you hear it from J.K. Dobbins, who went on to say that they, after feeling bad and there's the element of guilt, that they have a responsibility. And again, just hammering home, they're like, these guys on the defense are doing everything possible in their power. And there's got to be no more deflating feeling than just realizing that you are the problem. Like, it's you're the problem.
Yep.
And you hear the difference in tone when you come to the offensive players like Mike McGlinchey, who just talked about how difficult short weeks in preparation can be without using it as an excuse, because every team in the NFL has to do it at one point or another. Or if you're a Sean Payton team, sometimes you got to do it twice because you flex yourself into it.
Right.
And we'll get to Sean Payton in a minute. But Mike McGlinchey talked about the need for these guys to just get away from it a little bit. You mentioned one game in 23 days with the Thursday night mini bye and then a bye week coming up after Kansas City. And I start to hear that, and like, yeah, I think conventional wisdom, you can say, hey, yeah, it's an opportunity to flush it away. But I hear things like that. Oh, we just need to get away from it and clear our minds. Get away from, this is your job,
right?
Get away from it. You've had you're 10 weeks into an NFL season. You haven't performed well offensively in at minimum 7 of the 10 games, and you're talking about the need to get away. Get away from what? That to me almost shows a little bit of defeatism of like, we don't quite know how to fix it. And then you transition over to the defensive side of the ball, and you're hearing Nick Bonito talk about how good it was to get that sackless streak of 3 games off of his back. He had 1.5 against the Raiders last night, and they're like happy and eager and excited to celebrate some of their accomplishments, but it almost feels like they know they can't as much because of how bad things are on the offensive side of the ball and not trying to widen that perceptual gap between the two. Zach Allen had some illuminating comments in that regard after the game. Again, courtesy of our own Andrew Mason. Take a listen.
I mean, we just got to do our job, and whatever the situation is, we got to pride ourselves on that, whether it's a red zone stop or whatever. So, it all comes in ebbs and flows. Everyone forgets now, but Chargers and Colts, they picked our ass up. So we'll be fine.
We'll be fine. Right. And anytime I hear anything like that, it's like, it almost sounds like mom and dad talking to the kids like, hey, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. When deep down, and maybe they know, this is not fine. And it's not going to be fine for much longer if we don't figure it out in a hurry.
Yeah, and he's referencing games in September of when they picked us up. It's almost the middle of November. Thanksgiving's going to be here before we know it. Like, you can't just keep going back to, well, you remember that Colts game in week 2? Bo did throw a few touchdowns. Like, we're coming up on week 10, week 11. The playoffs are going to be here in a blink of an eye. So I get why Zach Allen has to say that. But I think if you went and had a latte, shout out Sean Payton with Zach Allen, he'd be one of the many guys who going, I played my tail off last night. They scored 7 lousy points. That should have been a 31-7 win. That should have been a laugher, 28-7. That should have been everyone's hooting and hollering and celebrating. Instead, what happened, Richie? I think in Power Field at Mile High booed the Broncos like 10 times last night.
Yep.
And rightfully so.
They pointed it out every time on the broadcast.
And they deserve to be booed. And you got guys like Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk. And I respect Mike and I like Mike, but he's tweeting out, why are Broncos fans with the best record in the NFL booing their team? It's like, well, they're booing their team because they know good ball and they're not watching good ball at the moment. They're booing them because this offense is unacceptable. And you hear from Zach Allen there, guy's been in the NFL a long time. He's got a lot of media training. He's saying the right things. But to your point, you kind of read between the lines there. It's very easy to tell people we'll be fine. You know what? Doctors sometimes have to tell people, oh, you'll be fine. Yeah. The doctor may not be sure that patient's going to be fine.
Right. He's read your chart. He knows.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, I'm thankful they're 8-2, and I'm not trying to be this ball of negativity a day after the Broncos improved to the best record in the NFL, but I'm just taking my tone from the players. There was even Nick Bonito and Riley Moss on the Amazon Prime set.
Yep.
You remember Sean Payton going on the Prime set last year in New Orleans, and it was like this big party, right? He had won in his return, and they had kicked the crap out of the Saints, and it was all exciting. Last night, Bonito and Moss are out there, and like they're smiling and having fun, but even them are like, why are we on a set right now? Like we don't deserve to be on a set. Maybe defensively we do, but this team as a whole, it didn't feel like the party that sometimes those primetime wins do feel like.
You mentioned Sean Payton and the comments that he's made at times. He has certainly not been shy at any point in his NFL and or broadcasting career to find a microphone and speak into it in ways that reverberate across the NFL community. Well, Sean Payton took the podium last night after yet another frustrating performance offensively and was asked a question by potentially a rising public enemy number one here in the local media scene, Luca Evans. And it is not Evan, it's Evans.
Evan.
My name's Luca.
Is that crystal clear?
Yeah. Is it crystal clear? Well, Luca Evans asked Sean Payton, in I think a very fair and reasonable way, are you comfortable with the way that your team has flowed offensively and the lack of production and consistency that has existed through 10 weeks? And here's what Sean Payton had to say.
Sean, again, as you've said, your record says who you are.
Exactly right. But are you going to say but? No. What's your question?
Are you comfortable with the script of just kind of how these games
continue to be won? We're never comfortable as coaches, but there's no buts. So you're asking, am I comfortable as a coach? We're never satisfied. If my answer were to you, I'm comfortable, that'd be silly, right? So obviously we gotta clean up the penalties. We gotta clean up some of the execution, and that is an ongoing thing that probably never ends. There's you search for that Shangri-La. Right now, we're a team sitting at 8 wins. I think we're the only team sitting there. So. And yet we're constantly looking internally and starting, but it was a tough night offensively, obviously, and I give them credit. They did some things differently that we hadn't seen, and you start looking at your call sheet with your sub plan, and so we'll look at that tape and we'll learn from it. We always will.
We'll learn from that tape. We always will. Well, Will, I'm going to have to take a pause here for a second. And I know that our comments on our YouTube channel and our social media streams are blowing up. And I want to get to those on the tail end of this here. But I just have to say something in response to Sean Payton there, because it's starting to fall a little bit on deaf ears for me when you say we're searching for that Shangri-La. Mm-hmm. Sean Payton was supposed to be the Shangri-La. He was the offensive genius that was going to be brought in to help bring this franchise back to the winning pedigree that it had established over decades and decades of success under the Pat Bowlen era. And he had the backing of the best ownership group and the richest ownership group in the entire National Football League, and maybe even in professional sports with Greg Penner and the Walton family. And yet, Will, we trot the same product. We see the same product trotted out week after week after week. And it becomes like clockwork that it looks bad for 3.5 quarters. And maybe there's just enough to get Will Lutz in field goal range to eke him by. But I don't know what you are learning in week 10 that you haven't already seen through the first 10 games of the NFL season. The Broncos against the Raiders once again eclipsed their season and game average of 10 penalties per game. They went an entire quarter without a first down. They didn't have 100 yards in total rushing. They didn't have 150 yards in net passing. They found a way to win a game that almost defies statistical probability and science for them to be able to do. And they've managed to do it in a fourth quarter setting 4 times to amass their 8 total wins on the season. If you tell me at the podium, Sean Payton, that you're still learning and trying to figure out what's wrong, then I'm starting to question who is doing the evaluating. And I think that that's fair, Will, because we're looking at a back half of a season where, as of today, on a victory Friday that maybe doesn't feel like it, the Broncos have more wins than any team in the NFL, and yet they feel as flimsy and fake as any contender in the National Football League.
Yeah, no, I think that's all a fair assessment. What you just said there, you backed it with stats and facts and numbers. And right now, I think if the Broncos had to play a playoff game tomorrow, 80 to 85% of people would pick against them. And that's even with this epic, great, phenomenal Super Bowl caliber defense, because the offense is just that bad. And you hear Sean Payton last night sort of try to pick a fight with the reporter and then ultimately give his best answer the entire press conference. It's what I wrote about at DenverSports.com. He acknowledged that, yeah, we had offensive struggles last night. We got to find a way to fix them. But I'm with you, man. It's November the 7th? Like, these are conversations I want to have in July and August. These aren't conversations I want to have in November. I want the offense to be humming and clicking and moving along. And we're talking about, are we booking flights to Santa Clara for Super Bowl 60? Because even with this defense right now, I can't sit here and confidently say, yeah, the Broncos are going back to Levi Stadium for another Super Bowl a decade later, because this offense is so flimsy. And I'll throw out the word a lot of people threw out fraudulent. It just is a fraudulent offense at this moment in time. So I didn't appreciate that Sean tried to pick the fight, but I did appreciate that he actually gave a little bit of a revealing answer, even if it sounds like you don't really like that answer. I kind of felt like I got a peek behind the curtain of some of his frustration.
Will, they had more penalties than points against the Raiders. They had more penalties than first downs.
And 2 more penalties per game this season than the Nathaniel Hackett season. Think about that. Right. What a disaster the Hackett season was. And somehow they're averaging 2 more penalties per game with Sean Payton as a quote-unquote Super Bowl contender.
So when you're looking at all of those things that came to light after this game, more penalties than points, more penalties than first downs, an entire quarter without a first down, no 100-yard rushing as a team, less than 150 yards net passing as an offense in 4 quarters of football, and you stand there and you tell me those things, I'm no longer interested in the step along the 12 steps that says admitting the problem is the first step to solving it.
Right.
Show me the solution. Because if you haven't been able to show me through 10 weeks, why should I or you or Broncos country believe that it's going to happen in any reasonable measure? And I don't want to come across too negative or down on a situation with a team where the Broncos have a 7-game win streak that they haven't accomplished since they won the Super Bowl. And I am not naive or unaware of how bad things have been for the Denver Broncos over the better part of the last decade. But the problem with renewed hope and faith, which we got when the Walton Penner ownership group took over and Sean Payton was brought in and Bo Nix was the handcrafted quarterback to help potentially be the franchise's next face. The problem with that, Will, is that the expectations start to return. There have been plenty of Broncos seasons where at week 9 or 10, we knew the direction the season was heading, and it made it easier to brace for the impact that was coming on the back half of the season. This year, in this season, the Broncos have the best record in the NFL. If the playoffs started today, they would be getting a first-round bye. And if the playoffs started today, this would be the first year in the history of the expanded NFL playoff format with the 7th seed for each conference, that 7th seed would be licking its chops to play the team that comes out of the bye.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. All the 7 seed would have to do would beat the 2, and then they'd get the 1, and they'd want to do it. You mentioned sort of the frustrations and the steps in the program. I just want to isolate one sequence last night. It's 3rd and 1 in a 7-7 football game, and they throw some backwards pass to Cortland Sutton where it looks like he's trying to throw the football. He doesn't. Ultimately loses 4 yards. Sean Payton still trots Will Lutz out there, 59-yarder, and it comes up what? Like 3-4 yards short. Like that, having those 4 yards would have been really good. And then Sean says post game, well, I'm glad Cortland didn't throw it, but when that play works, it looks nice in practice. Well, I don't care. I don't care.
It makes no sense in that situation. You have a running back in J.K. Dobbins who in the game and over the course of a season regularly and routinely averages north of 5 yards per carry, and you need one to continue sustaining a drive in a game where you have not been able to do so with any measure of respect, and you try to run a double pass with Courtland Sutton, I would have felt better if he had tried to run another tackle-eligible pass like he failed to Garrett Bowles, or pitched the ball to Dondrea Tillman, who continues to make plays in space in the open field.
Yeah.
It's too cute, and it's getting in the Broncos' way. So, Will, the logical question comes then, how do they fix it? How does Sean Payton, either from a schematic standpoint or a personnel standpoint, try to move this thing in the right direction? Or, because there's been two reasonable sides to this argument, is it really at its core a fatal flaw in the execution of what Sean Payton is trying to design, which then falls more on the players than it does the coach?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. How do they fix it? And it's something I guarantee the coaches lost sleep over last night and are going to be working on all weekend. But I'm going to have an answer, and you're going to tell me it's a cop-out. But I actually think the more I've digested this game over the last, 12, 14 hours at this point, I think this is simply the answer, Richie. They miss Marvin Mims more than anyone knows.
It is staggering to see the difference.
Yeah, Marvin Mims has missed the last 2 games with the concussion. Probably would have been back if they had played a Sunday game. Unfortunately, it was a Thursday game. Didn't quite get through the protocol. We're knocking on all the wood. Should absolutely play against the Chiefs on the 16th. But that's my answer for you, man. And people are going to say, well, that's not a real solution. Well, maybe it is a real solution because the trade deadline has come and gone. So you're not bringing in a player from another team. Jalen Waddle's not walking through that door. But Marvin Mims is going to walk through that door. And I think a Marvin Mims is almost like a glue guy, right? Like Marvin Mims in this offense, I'm not going to say I owe him an apology because I've always been a Marvin Mims fan. But I think some in Broncos country need to evaluate his importance. And watching the offense without him these last 2 games has been a tough watch. I didn't have on my bingo card Marvin Mims being offensive glue guy, offensive MVP. But after watching the last 2 games, that's my answer for you. I just cannot wait till Mims is back in the lineup. Am I oversimplifying things, or is that a fair way to look at it?
No, I think that Mims and his contributions and role has kind of shifted in the last handful of years. Last year he was obviously established as an all-pro level special teams contributor in the return game, kick return and punt return. But offensively, it was kind of like, he has the capability to take the top off of a defense from a speed perspective, but is he a wide receiver that profiles at the NFL level, like an every down, full route tree wide receiver too? And a lot of times I feel like the answer is shaded toward no. But again, nothing is more valuable, I think, to establishing your worth than when people realize what it looks like without it.
Exactly.
And I think Marvin Mims has had a massive swing in his favor when you look at the inconsistencies and the struggles in the return game. And then you look at the fact that the offense, which was already at times clunky and one-dimensional in the passing game in favor of Courtland Sutton, takes an even further step back without him. And whether that's Sean Payton's ability to move him around the formation, use him as that pseudo baby joker type role that he took on in the back half of 2024, maybe it's as simple as that. And we know how much of Sean Payton's offense is predicated on formational changes and different personnel groupings to throw all of the kitchen sink at defenses every week, even though the kitchen sink most of the time this season feels a little bit more clogged than running smoothly. I do think that you are not oversimplifying it in the sense of this offense struggles when it's at full strength and full capacity in every game, not against the Dallas Cowboys. So taking even one reasonable piece away from it seems to have a ripple effect that is even more punishing.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think too, if you're a guy like Mims, obviously watching the last 2 games has been frustrating, but when they're back in the building on Monday, man, I think that guy's going to be bouncing off the walls, excited, thrilled, ready to go, because I think even Marvin Mims, you said it, sometimes people don't realize how valuable you are until you're away. I think Marvin Mims is sitting there watching that game last night going, oh my goodness, I'm one of the best players on this team, at least when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. And I think he'll be eager to get back in there and help. And you better believe that Sean Payton and Bo Nix are ready for Marvin Mims to get back, given the fact that they scored 7 points against 3 quarters in the Texans without him, and then scored 7 points in 3 quarters without him last night. And I'm not even going to give him credit. I know the field goal was at the very end of the 3rd quarter, but special teams finally made a play, set up, block, punt.
Yep.
Offense went -2 yards on a game-winning drive. Wrap your mind around that. The offense went -2 yards on a game-winning drive. Marvin Mims got to be licking his chops to get back on the field.
You and I will have had a handful of minutes here to exercise some demons, to decompress a little bit. I want to make sure I afford that opportunity to our listeners as well. So thank you all for chiming in on the comments. Let's throw a couple of them up there on the screen, Trey, and see how the rest of Broncos country is feeling and if it aligns with us. The problem with Bo Nix is that he is refusing to set his feet when he throws and therefore throws while jumping in the air. What quarterback does that? Will, do you think with what you've seen from Bo Nix over the last season and a half of the start of his NFL career, that these footwork and mechanic issues that maybe have regressed a little bit are correctable enough on the backstretch to see a noticeable improvement?
Yeah, it's a great comment because you're right. It just looks like he is bouncing around up there, and the feet are never set. The feet are never planted. Happy feet, good way to put it. He's just short arming balls. Even his deep ball right now, like his arm strength just doesn't look very good.
He's maybe one of the worst deep ball throwers in the NFL right now, statistically speaking.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not because he doesn't have a good arm. It's because his feet are not in a good place. So I think it's fixable. I think it's adjustable. Don't get me wrong. But at a certain point in time, like, can Bo Nix fix his footwork in the middle of a season? To me, that feels like a February, March, April, May type project, not a...
That should have been worked on in the past offseason.
Yeah, that should have been done in February, March, April, May of 2025, not 2026. So I hope so. The only thing I will say is you led the show with this, is that Bo did take a massive leap in the middle of his rookie year. Is there a chance he busts the sophomore slump with a massive leap in the middle of his second year? Maybe. To quote Gary Kubiak, we're fixing to find out. I'm not banking on it, but I'm also not saying it's a 0% chance.
This is where Broncos country tends to lose me a little bit, is when we see comments like this one that say Stiddy is the answer. And I think that, again, we can be as frustrated with Bo Nix and Sean Payton with the inefficiencies on offense as any, but Will, if you forget the history from whence you came, you are destined to repeat it. And it is not that hard. We do not have to scratch our brains to go back that far to remember how bad and suboptimal the quarterback play has been here in Denver since Peyton Manning walked out the door. I still have nightmares at times of the carousel graphic that used to play on every Broncos broadcast with all the different floating heads of names that came through, including our own Philip Lindsay, for a game that was maybe the lowest point.
The COVID game.
The COVID game.
Yep.
Yes. So Will, I would imagine that you are in agreement with me here that as bad as it's looked offensively and as frustrating as Bo Nix has seemed to kind of take a step back in certain areas in his sophomore campaign, I don't know how deep of a step back there would be for me to rationalize with all seriousness that Jarrett Stidham is the answer moving forward in this 2025 season.
Yeah, and I'll just keep it simple for folks out there, and I appreciate the comment, but there's two things that Sean Payton's never going to do. He's going to quit his job before he does it, okay? And those two things are, one, give up the play calling.
Yep.
And I know the morning show with Schlereth and Stokely and Mike Evans talked about it. He's just not going to give it up. He'd quit before he gave it up. And two, he'd quit before he benched Bo Nix for Jarrett Stidham. Bo Nix would have to get hurt. I don't even want to entertain that. Don't even want to talk about it. So while I appreciate the comment, like, those are two subjects that I don't even really feel like broaching because they're just not based in reality. Peyton's not giving up the play calling, and he's not switching to Stidham.
Yeah, he's true. And I see the comment there that says all the people wanting Stiddy are the same people who would have wanted to bench Josh Allen after his sophomore year.
It's a great comment.
There's a fair comparison there, right? And it's not to say that, Bo Nix has the trajectory or the arc in front of him that maybe Josh Allen has experienced, because Josh Allen, as a physical phenom at the quarterback position, has kind of taken the NFL by storm. And the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes constant debate in the AFC, or even the Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen MVP struggle. Those are all things we hope are in the cards for Bo Nix in the future. But the premise of saying, listen, it's been rough and it's been bad, but this is how it's been with other quarterbacks too. And I think you see that on the broadcast week to week when you start comparing Bo Nix's first 28 starts to Peyton Manning's first 28 starts, or John Elway's. And I actually hate when broadcasts and national outlets and analysts do that, because it just feels like a little bit of a death sentence from the court of public opinion. Like when they started doing that with Tim Tebow, when he was here during Tebow Mania, and John Elway, one, you just knew that was the beginning and the end of John Elway wanting Tim Tebow as the quarterback of the Denver Broncos.
True.
But two, it's apples to oranges. It's two different eras of NFL, and it's two different stylistic quarterbacks that have different strengths and weaknesses. So I agree with the commenter there that you're getting into uncharted territory and unwanted territory, in my opinion, when you do that.
And you're getting into things that are just not going to happen, Richie. Like that's the thing. At the end of the day, like, Bo Nix isn't getting benched and Sean Payton's not giving up play calling. So at some point, we're sort of wasting our breath on that.
I see it there on the screen. I do not think that they can fix their offensive problems, and it will cost Denver greatly when it matters. So, Will, that would point towards some of the things that I was maybe expressing frustration about, of like, if you haven't figured out the root of the problem through 10 weeks, then what gives you confidence in the next 4 or 5 that suddenly on the tail end of the season with the postseason kind of ramping up, that you're going to be able to do so? And if that is the case, Will, if the offense stays exactly as it is from weeks 1 to 10, as weeks 11 to 17, can the Denver Broncos maintain this level of success on the back half of the season that they have found a way to manufacture in the first half?
No, I don't think so, because there's no magic pill to just fix your offense, right? Like we've talked about doctors a little bit on the show. When you go to the doctor and you're sick, you're like, doc, just give me the magic pill. I want to feel better. And sometimes they can provide that for you, and you get a prescription, you take it for a few days and you feel great. You feel better. But with the offense in the NFL, that doesn't exist. Like, believe me, Sean Payton isn't just rolling out of bed and going, our offense is fine. Like, I promise you, this is driving him as nuts as it is the rest of us. The problem with that is he's tried to fix it and has not found the solution. And it's very hard to fix NFL offenses on the fly. And that would shock me if it happens. It would. But at the same time, it doesn't have to get fixed to an A+ level. Like, last night was an F, right? If last night had been a C and we're sitting here talking about a 24-7 win, this show has a totally different tone to it. So that's the good news for Broncos fans. You don't have to get it from an F to an A. You just got to graduate. D's get degrees. C's get degrees. That's what this offense has to do to give them a realistic chance to win a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, because, Will, if they don't, there's a very real chance that on the tail end of this 2025 season, as we look ahead to 2026, we're going to look back and go, that was a Super Bowl or an AFC championship caliber defense that got squandered because the offense, led by an offensive coach and a quarterback who he handpicked, just couldn't get it together. And I'm seeing it again in the comments here. John Elway in year 2, 18 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. Anyone mad at Bo is a casual fan that might need therapy. I love snark. I love a good dig. But I will just say in rebuttal to that, again, that's nonsense to me. To say that you can't be frustrated with what you've seen from Bo Nix in a single game setting, if we're just talking about Thursday Night Football, or an extrapolated setting over the first 10 weeks of the season where the offense has had to defy NFL probability and statistics to be able to come back, one of the greatest NFL comebacks in fourth quarter NFL history against the Giants. They scored 18 points in the fourth quarter against the Eagles. They had to manufacture wins in walk-off nature against the Texans, and they found a way to scrape by against the Raiders. You can't tell me that as a rational and reasonable observer of the game, that if you're mad at Bo Nix or at Sean Payton or at the offense as a whole for the way that they have struggled to perform, that makes you a casual fan. That, to me, is painting with way too broad of a brush. And frankly, I think you're letting that unit off the hook more than they deserve.
Yeah, you can be mad and disappointed and upset. I think those are all legitimate emotions, but you can be those things without wanting to give up on Bo Nix, right?
You can love something and want it to be better.
There's an absolute middle ground here between, hey, nothing to see here, and go to Stiddy, right? Like, we're kind of doing extremes today on this Friday, and I get it. It was a game that elicited extreme reactions, but nothing to see here? No, there's definitely something to see here. Go to Stiddy? We're not going to Stiddy. That's not going to happen. Let's try to be a little more centered, a little more middle ground. That's how I land after that ugly 10-7 victory.
I absolutely do. And again, I think that part of the reason why you have frustration is because you know in your bones, or you feel very strongly, that the quarterback, the coach, the offense, and the team are capable of much more than they're showing, especially on the offensive side of the ball. This is a team that for the first time really since 2015, we've looked at, and it hasn't been crazy to say, this is a team that gets out of the first round of the playoffs and furthers the momentum that they built in Bo's rookie season, where they made a wild card appearance, ending a streak of losing seasons that had lasted since the 2016-2017 season, ending a streak of postseason absences that had happened since they won the Super Bowl. And there is real, genuine, tangible, at least it seems, building blocks to build upon. So when it doesn't manifest itself and it feels like there is actually regression or slipping in that regard, that's what elicits those strong emotions, is actual belief and faith in what the team could be. So we will see how it all tends to shake out. The Broncos have a mini bye after getting rid of that performance and trying to flush Thursday Night Football down the drain. They have the Chiefs coming up, who they will face a handful of times in the next few weeks, and a bye week after the Chiefs to help hopefully, which we've said multiple times this season, turn a new leaf and a new chapter for Sean Payton in this offense. Will, thank you so much for joining me today.
Appreciate you having me.
It was helpful to have another voice to bounce things off of
course,
in the frustration and the kind of head-scratching nature of what we've continued to see. But I do ultimately believe, as it sounds like you do, that this Broncos offense, we believe, is capable of more, can do more. And if they're going to achieve the heights that we set for them going into this season, it's basically a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I'm glad they have the mini bye. Glad we can just watch Red Zone this weekend.
It's going to be so nice.
And then come next Monday, turn the page to the Chiefs because it's the biggest game the Broncos have played in almost a decade.
We will turn the page toward the Chiefs on Monday. We've got the Nuggets against the Steph Curry-less Warriors coming later tonight. The Avs have a couple of games throughout this weekend to continue their hot start to the season. It is, despite how frustrating it was and how like Bird Box, peel your eyes open it felt to watch Thursday Night Football last night, this is a great time to be a sports fan in a professional sense in Colorado, and we hope that that momentum continues into the backstretch of this NFL season. We will be here to chronicle it all for you at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. Thank you so much for joining us. Like and subscribe to our YouTube page at Denver Sports 104.3 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're watching us on X or Facebook Live, like, share, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and we will be back with you on Monday for the next rundown.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the